Bonsoir. Welcome to the newcomers and welcome back for the others. This is The Siege of Mackendall, Book 6. Chapter 22. Here we are. "Trouble, you fool!" grated Malcolm at his cowering assistant. "I told you to be here before moonset, before it awoke." He gestured to the dark circle of trees around them as he spoke, and faintly the small group heard that deep, evil chuckle again. Trouble hung his head in shame and fear. "Sorry, Master," he said miserably. But there was no forgiveness in the sorcerer's glaring eyes. "Sorry? No good to be sorry? Fool, you have woken him, and now I must protect us all." The Scandians had listened wide-eyed to this exchange, perhaps more terrifying than the event in the forest, and Malcolm's arcane appearance. Was his callous, unforgiving treatment of Trouble? The Scandians had been around long enough to know that Malcolm usually treated the deformed giant with kindness and soft words. This was a different person altogether. Well, having regained a little equanimity, now that they were out of the trees, watched with narrow eyes. He realized that Malcolm and Trouble were playing a part for the benefit of MacHaddish. He leaned close to Horace and whispered, "Go along with it." Horace nodded, but at the slight sound, Malcolm rounded upon them, one arm outstretched, the forefinger adorned with a long snail, pointing at them like an arrow. "Silence, you idiots! This is no time for chatter. Sir Thrick Nish is awake." And at the name there was a reaction from MacHaddish. The Scotty let out an involuntary cry of terror and sank to his knees, huddled over the heavy log that Trouble had dropped. Malcolm stepped toward him, standing over the crouching figure as he spoke. Yes, MacHaddish, the dark demon Sir Thrick Nish, is abroad in this forest, watching us as we stand here. You know of him, I think. The shredder of bodies and renderer of limbs, the red-fanged destroyer of men. He paused. There was a strangled sob of fear from the Scotty. He remained bowed over the heavy log that secured his chain, refusing to look up, as if fearful of what he might see. Malcolm continued inexorably. "Only the light of my fire is keeping him back from this clearing. But Sir Thrick Nish won't be denied for long. He's gathering his courage now, and he knows the flame will soon die down." As if in an answer, a deep-throated chuckle sounded from the darkness outside the clearing. MacHaddish's head snapped up. Even from several meters away, Will could see the whites of the man's wide-open, terrified eyes against the blue paint that covered his face. We've no time to waste. I have to build our defensive perimeter, Malcolm said. He ignored the staring general, gesturing to his assistant. Trobor, take this man over there. Trobor led the Scandians to a point near the edge of the clearing indicated by his master. The sea wolves looked fearfully at the dark wall of the trees as they approached it. They would have preferred to remain right in the middle of the clearing, near the fire. Sit, Malcolm commanded them, and, following Trevor's lead, they sat cross-legged on the damp ground. The sorcerer then moved around them, muttering incomprehensible incantation as he poured black powder from a sack in a large circle around them. Don't touch the circle, he warns them. The soul stealer can touch you if your circle is unbroken. He ushered Will and Horace to another point in the clearing, motioning them to sit on the ground. He poured more black powder in a circle around them. He began the mumbling incantation again as he moved around Will and Horace. Then, in the middle of it all, without changing intonation or volume, he said quietly, in his normal voice, "Don't try to guess what I'm doing. Don't discuss it. Just look scared to death." Will nodded and saw an almost imperceptible nod in return. It made sense, he realized. If he and Horace were to sit here calmly and analytically trying to second-guess his actions, they would destroy the atmosphere he was working to create. Malcolm. It was almost impossible to think of him as Malcolm in this context. Moved away from them now and formed another black circle around MacAdish. The Scotty had recovered a little by now and watched him as the black powder fell around him. Malcolm met his gaze as he completed the circle. "You're safe in the black circle," he said. "Do you understand?" MacAdish nodded, swallowing heavily. Malcolm's face darkened. "Say it!" he ordered. "Say you understand." "I understand," the Scotty said. There was a thick accent to his speech that made the word almost unrecognizable. Will's eyebrows shot up. It was the first time the Scotty had spoken since they had captured him, the first time that he understood their Araluan language. Although he thought immediately it would have made little sense to send someone who didn't speak Araluan to negotiate with Karen. Now, not only had MacAdish spoken, he had done so in response to an order from Malcolm. It seemed that the sorcerer was beginning to assert dominance over the stiff, naked Scotty. Will glanced quickly at Horace, so that the young warrior's eyes were lowered. His head bowed, and realized that he was looking altogether too interested in the processing himself. He copied his friend's example and lowered his head, pulling the coil of his cloak farther forward. From inside the shadow of the coil, he could watch Malcolm at work without risking his feature being seen. The tall figure strode across the clearing now, reflections from the silver hat flickering across the trees, and picked up a long black thorn staff. The wood was gnarled and highly polished from constant handling over the years. He held it above his head. "The 3 black circles are complete," he called to the forest. "I hold the sacred Blackwood scepter. We are protected from you, c.thundah." An angry snarl resonated through the trees in answer. On the southern side of the clearing, the side they had approached from, there was a sudden glare of red light as something flashed between the trees. Then it came again, closer this time, circling the clearing as it moved to the west. Malcolm backed away from the trees towards a fire in the center of the clearing. Will looked around at the other in the circle. Trouble and the Scandians were wide-eyed and staring, their eyes searching the trees for the next sign of light or movement. MacHaddish was the same. Will glanced at Malcolm and saw that he was watching MacHaddish carefully. Once he was assured that the Scotty's attention was distracted, he reached into his cloak and took a small package from an inner pocket. Moving closer to the fire, he dropped the packet into the embers at its edge. There was another flash of red in the trees. Moving to the northern side of the clearing now. Then, at the spot where it disappeared, a thin curtain of fog began to rise from the ground just inside the tree line. Malcolm began to back away, moving towards the huddled figure of MacHaddish. "Stay back, c.thundah," he called. "The flames of fire and the circle of power forbid you to enter this clearing." Even as he said it, there was a sudden flare of red from the fire itself. A red flash leaped from the flames, followed by a thick red mist that bloomed up from the sky of the fire. Right at the point, Will realized where Malcolm had tossed the small packet only a few seconds before. The Scandians, Trobor, and MacHaddish all cried out in shock. A little belatedly, Will and Horace added their voices to the reactions. Then, as the strange red mist spread over the fire, the flames began to dwindle, as if being smothered. The clearing grew darker as the flame died down. Malcolm's tall figure threw a distorted, elongated shadow across the ground, and the trees seemed to press in closer to them. "Corloc's close," shouted one of the Scandians. "What the devil is that?" Everyone followed the direction of his pointing arm. In the bank of fog that was rising among the trees to the north, they saw a sudden red flare of light. But this was more than just light. This was the shape of a terrible face looming through the mist. It was there for an instant and then gone, but it was indelibly printed on their memories, a triangular face with hollow, slanted eyes and a leering black mouth set with long, cannoned fangs. Wild tendrils of bird covered the chin, and the hair was a red mess of tangles. with 2 curved thorns visible through them. Then it was gone, and a shattering laugh split the night. The laugh ran around the circles of trees that surrounded them, and their eyes followed its movement involuntarily. Then, high in the sky above the clearing, the face reappeared, this time glowing as if it lit by an inner light. It swooped low, then soared across the clearing, climbing back into the trees and seeming to explode and disappear in a shower of sparks that left the darkness even blacker as it died away. Malcolm had recoiled as the apparition swooped low overhead, then tried unsuccessfully to strike at it with his blackthorn staff. He staggered and dropped to his knees. Then, maintaining his hold on the staff, he pointed to the fog bank again, where the horrible grinning face had appeared once more. "Go, c.thundah, I forbid you entry. Go!" The face disappeared again, and the watcher cried out in terror as a new apparition formed, black and shimmering in the fog. Or rather, realized, on the fog, a huge figure took shape, massively built, wearing a huge hornet helmet and holding a jagged edge axe. It towered above them for a second, then faded to nothing. The night warrior well realized he had seen the dreadful figure the first time he had ventured into Grimsdale Wood, and it had terrified him. A few days later, Alice had discovered it was nothing more than an illusion, using fate lights and a magic lantern projector created by Malcolm to scare away intruders. The fire was nothing but a small pile of coals now. Malcolm rose unsteadily to his feet. He pointed the black staff, threatening the trees that encircled them. "Stay back, I warn you," he called. But now a series of red flashes and flares ran through the trees, circling the clearing, throwing huge twisted shadows across the small open space. Shadows that were there and then gone in an instant. And as this happened, they heard c.thundah speak for the first time, his voice deep, resonant, and bone-chilling. "The flame have died, the power of the circles is weak. I will have the blood of one of you." One of the Scandinavians went to rise, battle-axe ready in his hand, but Malcolm's outstretched hand stopped him before he had gone above a crouch. "Stay where you are, you fool!" His voice cracked like a whip. "He says he wants one, and one only. You can have the Scotty." "No!" MacHaddish's cry was high-pitched and agonized. To the Scandinavians, the demonic red face was a terrifying apparition, but to MacHaddish, it lay at the very heart of terror. It was the basis of all fear for Scots, instilled in them when they were children. The flesh-eater, the renderer, the theatre of limbs. Serthreknesh was all of these things and more. It was a demon, the ultimate evil in Scottish superstition. Serthreknesh didn't just kill his victims. He stole their souls and their very being, feeding on them to make himself stronger. If Serthreknesh had your soul, there was no hereafter, no peace at the end of the long mountain road, and there was no memory of the victim either. For if a person were taken by Serthreknesh, his family were compelled to expunge all memory of him from their minds. With Malcolm's words, MacHaddish knew he was not facing just terrible death. He was facing a forever of nothing. He looked up now into the irreplaceable face as the wizard stepped toward him. "No," he pleaded. Please spare me this." But the blackthorn road had moved out and began to scrub an opening in the circle of black powder that surrounded MacHaddish. Frantically, MacHaddish tried to restore it, pushing the powder back into place with his hand, but his effort only succeeded in widening the gap. His breath sobbed in his throat, and tears of abject terror scored a path through the blue paint on his face. Then the face reappeared in the mist, seeming to be more clearly defined now. It flickered, faded, and disappeared again. MacHaddish looked up at the wizard's painted face. All traces of the proud and bending Scottish general were gone now. "Please?" he said, and the staff stopped its work. Malcolm paused. "No," he said, impassively. MacHaddish, already on his knees, now bent forward until his forehead touched the ground, making sure that he remained within the circle. Will nodded. "I give you anything," he said. "Anything you ask. Just keep the demon away." Malcolm's staff moved toward the thin black line once more, touching it, stirring the grains of black powder that marked it out, slowly separating them, deliberately working to form a breach in the circle. The general watched the tip of the staff at work, watched his safe haven slowly being scraped away. "Please," he said, in a voice that was cracking with fear. The staff stopped moving. "Tell me," Malcolm said in a deliberate voice. "What are you planning with Karen?" Okay, folks, that's it for chapter 23. At school, I'm trying to learn how to do the TH sound, and I still have a lot of trouble to actually read with the TH sound. So I'd like some feedbacks if some of you have time. Well, anyways, see you for the next chapter.